Hi everyone, David Aragona here for another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. And this week the focus is down at Fairgrounds for the Grade 2 Risen Star on Saturday. This one going the 1.125 distance, serving as the local prep for the Louisiana Derby. 50 Kentucky Derby qualifying points on the line to the winner of the race. And really, that could get any horse into the Kentucky Derby field. So a lot is on the line on Saturday at Fairgrounds, and there are 14 horses entered vying for those 50 Kentucky Derby points. Let's throw up the field for this Risen Star, and it's a pretty wide open group. A lot of promise in this field, horses that are looking up to get onto this Kentucky Derby scene. Brad Cox has entered 3 runners in this race. Included among them is the likely favorite, the number 13 Victory Formation, who is 3 for 3 in his career. We'll talk about him a little bit more in just a bit. Brad Cox also has Angel of Empire and Tappett's Conquest. Steve Asmussen has a couple of runners in this race, including a recent trainer switch, the number 5 Harlow Cap. And we also have an accomplished runner from last year in the number 9 Curly Jack. There is a lot going on in this race, and we're going to talk about as many of the individual contenders as we can. Before we do that, though, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this Risen Star. And no surprise to see that fast pace flag showing up. Given the large field of 14 runners, there is a good amount of speed signed on, and I think we are likely to see the number 13 Victory Formation go forward from his outside post position. He possesses plenty of early speed and was a gate-to-wire winner of his most recent start. The number 5 Harlow Cap also has shown speed out in California, as has the number 4 Determinedly in his recent races at Fairgrounds. So we'll see if he's quite as fast as those 2 runners drawn to the outside, but any pace that develops up front would help closers like the number 6 Angel of Empire or the number 12 Croupi. And before we look at the individual contenders, let's take a look at one of the new features in TimeformUS. That is the Finish Projector. You can access this in your DRF mobile PPs by tapping on the TimeformUS tab and toggling over to the Finish Projector from the Pace Projector. And this is the TimeformUS algorithm selecting the result of the race, and the algorithm is pointing to the number 5 Harlow Cap as the winner. He is coming off a big speed figure maiden victory last time out, so I think that's why he's projected to be the winner of this race over the number 13 Victory Formation and the number 4 Determinedly, who are kind of in a photo there for second. So we'll see if I agree with that projection when we get to the end of this preview. But let's start by going through some of these contenders, and we'll begin with 2 of the Brad Cox trainees by taking a look at Victory Formation, winning the Smarty Jones Stakes last time out at Oaklawn Park. This horse was pretty impressive on this day. Clearly, he was best over stablemate Angel of Empire, who is also highlighted in this replay. But he got a perfect trip, and that's really been the story of Victory Formation's career so far. He's gotten very good trips in all 3 of his victories, was game to win that 6-furlong allowance race 2 back at Churchill Downs, and it was a good sign that he showed he could handle the 2 turns last time out at Oaklawn Park. Now he's stretching out an extra furlong. It'll be interesting to see if he takes after his pedigree, which really does suggest that more distance is not supposed to be a big problem. He's by Belmont Stakes winner Taprit. On the dam side, the dam Smart and Soft has produced Bellamore, who is a stakes placed runner going as far as 1 3/8 on the turf. So there definitely is stamina to handle more ground. We'll see if Victory Formation can do so, though, in a race that is likely to feature a more competitive pace than the one he encountered last time in the Smarty Jones. And given the wide open nature of this field, you have to decide for yourself how short a price could be too short on this Brad Cox trainee with a big following. The other Brad Cox trainee coming out of the Smarty Jones is the number 6 Angel of Empire, and I thought he was pretty game to continue chasing his stablemate all the way to the wire. He clearly is a horse that is improving with experience and distance. His last couple of races, both going a mile, he was impressive too back at Horseshoe Indianapolis, ran a much higher speed figure last time in the Smarty Jones, and I liked what Joe Talbot did with him after the wire that day. He was really letting this horse gallop out pretty far after the finish line, a good quarter mile. He just kept his hands in the, on this horse's neck and allowed him to run on past Victory Formation after the wire, as both of those Brad Cox trainees got pretty strong gallop outs in the Smarty Jones. So he feels like one that is a cup below these at this point, but given his upward trajectory and the fact that he's likely to appreciate at a distance, I think he's one that could get in the mix at a bit of a price. The third Brad Cox trainee in this race is the number 8 Tappett's Conquest, and he is one of a couple of horses, actually 3 horses in this race, race coming out of an allowance race that was run on the Lecompte undercard on January 21st. And he probably was best that day, even though he lost by a neck. Just was behind a slow pace in the early going, stuck on the rail. Florent Geroux appeared to have an opportunity to get him off the inside at the top of the stretch, but Tapit's Conquest was just kind of lugging in a little bit, kept inside, and he ended up having to come through inside of the eventual winner through a very tight hole that seemed to intimidate him a little bit. So I think Tapit's Conquest is likely better than that recent result, and as a son of Tapit, he's supposed to relish the added ground that he's getting to work with here. So we'll see if he could be more effective in this race. Clearly, it's a big step up in class, but Brad Cox has been pretty successful so far on this Kentucky Derby trail with his 3-year-olds. Determinedly is the horse that finished ahead of Tapit's Conquest in that recent allowance race on the Lecompte undercard. And he was game to get the job done by a neck, but he really had all the best of it on the front end. You see that blue color-coded pace figure for the opening quarter mile of that race of just a 78. That really gave him a big advantage right from the beginning and allowed him to hold sway over the closing Tapit's Conquest and Silver Heist, who's also in here at the very end. I think Determinedly is going to have to run better than that, going the 1.125 distance here if he's going to be successful. And there is a lot of other speed signed on that will not allow him to get away with that favorable trip that he was able to enjoy last time out. Another horse that ran on Lecompte Day is the number 10, Two Fills, and he's actually the only horse in this race that is coming out of the Lecompte, which is usually considered to be the local prep for the Risen Star, but some others who ran in that race, including the winner, Instant Coffee, are waiting for other races further down the Derby trail. I thought Two Fills ran pretty well in that Lecompte. You see those red color-coded TimeformUS pace figures indicating that it really did heat up on the front end, and while he was reserved off that pace, he wasn't nearly as far back as the eventual winner, Instant Coffee. And Instant Coffee is a horse that once he gets rolling, he is really hard to hold off. And Two Fills actually made the first move to challenge the leaders at the top of the stretch before he got swallowed up by Instant Coffee in the final furlong. I still thought Two Fills battled on pretty gamely at the end of that race. Once he finally switched over to his right lead, he was finishing pretty well on towards the finish line. I like this horse's performance too back when he won the Street Sense. Clearly, he handled the sloppy track that day, but that was a commanding victory where he was a little sloppy with his lead changes, kind of got goofy in the final furlongs of that race. I think he's a horse that still has potential to move forward, even though this is his 7th career start, and he feels like one that could fly under the radar a little bit from a price standpoint in this Risen Star. Let's take a look at some horses coming in from different directions. Among them is the number 14, Private Creed. We'll take a look at his last race at Sam Houston when he was second on the turf in the Texas Turf Mile. And this was a pretty game performance. His first try going beyond the sprint distance, going the 1 mile, and he battles on really gamely to the wire inside of the eventual winner, and the winner is, who was a graded stakes winner himself during his 2-year-old season. You could see Private Creed doing everything he can to hold off that horse and just loses a head bob right at the end. Obviously, the big question with Private Creed is the surface switch from the turf to the dirt. He is a horse that does have some dirt pedigree on the dam side, and Steve Aston clearly thinks that he has trained well on the dirt to try a race like this, but it's a big step up, and having to go from the mile distance now out to the 1 1/8 after having never gone beyond a sprint prior to that last start, I think it's a pretty big ask for Private Creed. Horse coming out of a different direction that also had success as a 2-year-old is the number 9, Curly Jack. He is making his first start since a runner-up finish in the Grade 2 Kentucky Jockey Club last year in November at Churchill Downs. And that day, he was second to Instant Coffee, who we already have seen come back and be the impressive winner of the Lecompte. Obviously, Instant Coffee not coming back in this race, but Curly Jack had kept good company even prior to that. He was a decent 5th behind the best 2-year-olds in the country in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. He's just a horse that has to get a little faster from a speed figure standpoint. He does have a nice foundation underneath him from his 2-year-old season, and some might say that he actually was a little bit unlucky last time in that Kentucky Jockey Club. He was one of a number of horses that had to encounter some traffic trouble in that race, was kind of stymied in behind the leaders until about the 8th pole, at which point he did shake loose and just wasn't able to reel in Instant Coffee, who had gotten the jump on him at that point. But Curly Jack ran well that day. I expect a good performance from him, but you have to wonder if these 3-year-olds that showed promise at 2 are going to be able to take that step forward when they come back off a layoff on the Kentucky Derby trail. Another horse coming out of a different prep at another venue is the number 7 Sun Thunder. We'll take a look at his past performances. He most recently was 4th in the Grade 3 Southwest at Oaklawn Park, behind one of the horses that had considered at the top of a lot of people's Derby lists, and actually at the top of the Derby Watch Top 20 that Brad Free and I are keeping track of every week. That is Arabian Night. And Sun Thunder crossed the wire nearly 10 lengths behind that highly touted foe. And all things considered, I thought Sun Thunder got a pretty good trip that day, saved ground early, was wheeled off the inside around the far turn with plenty of time to make a late run, and just was a little bit one pace through the late stages of that race. Red Route 1, who closed for second, came from farther back than him and just ran right by him in the stretch. Ken McPeak was asking a lot of this horse to step up out of a maiden victory and try that Grade 3 last time, but once again, he's encountering a pretty tough spot in this Grade 2 Risen Star, so it might just be a little bit too much too soon for a promising horse like Sun Thunder. Now let's take a look at some horses coming out of maiden races into this Risen Star. And among those is the number 5, Harlow Cap. We'll take a look at his last race at Santa Anita. Now, this is a horse that has been trained up until, well, basically Saturday by trainer Bob Baffert. And as has been widely reported, these Bob Baffert trainees have to switch to other trainers if they are going to earn points towards the Kentucky Derby. So in this race, Harlow Cap will be switching into the barn of trainer Steve Asmussen. But make no mistake, he has been training out in California with Bob Baffert right up until this start. And in this maiden race that we just took a look at, he was a pretty impressive winner. Did get a good trip leading from gate to wire, but beat a pretty solid field of maidens out there, got a 109 TimeformUS speed figure, and I really liked his performance two back. Even though he lost that maiden race, he had some significant trouble going into the clubhouse turn that day, was off a bit slowly, tried to rush up inside, got sawed off in traffic, then made another middle move to take the lead on the backstretch. This appears to be a horse that is developing with each race. He has talent and he's bred to go longer distances, with Bob Baffert's stamina all over the pedigree by Triple Crown winner Justify, out of Derby runner-up, a dam by the Derby runner-up Bodemeister, and actually the dam is a three-quarter sister to Pioneer of the Nile, another horse who was second in the Kentucky Derby for the Bob Baffert stable. So Harlow Cap has a lot of things going in his direction on Saturday, and we'll see if he can deliver another good performance for the Steve Asmussen barn. One more horse that I want to take a look at that's coming out of a maiden race is the number 12 Krupe, and he is actually the only maiden in this field. He has never won a race. We'll take a look at the closest that he got to visiting the winner's circle, though, and that was last time out in this race at Aqueduct, where he takes a really good run at the eventual winner, Slip Mahoney, a horse who appears to have some promise for the Brad Cox stable, and Krupe just not able to forge past him in the final quarter mile here. But I liked what Krupe did in the opening stages of this race. He broke slowly, as he is wont to do, but after breaking slowly, he made this big prolonged move in the first half mile of this race to go from about 10 or 12 lengths off the pace to being right up stalking Slip Mahoney by the time they're moving around the far turn. Couldn't forge past that one in the late stages, but did take a big step forward on the speed figure scale, getting a 107 TimeformUS speed figure. Do note, though, that race took place on January 21st at Aqueduct, which was a day that it seemed like inside paths were a big advantage, and Krupe and the eventual winner did ride the rail throughout. So maybe that performance is a little bit inflated. Still, this is a horse that is a strong finisher, and if the pace does really heat up in this Risen Star, he's one that could be picking up the pieces at the end for trainer Todd Pletcher. So let's throw out my picks for this wide open edition of the Risen Star, and I'm putting the number 10 Two Fills on top. This is a horse that I took a liking to off that Street Sense Victory 2 back. Thought he ran pretty well behind Instant Coffee in the Lecompte last time, and this is the kind of race where I just want to search for a horse that is going to offer value in my estimation, that might slip through the cracks with regard to some other bettors. So I'm going against a horse like Victory Formation, who's going to take a lot of money. He's not my top four. I will use, though, the number 5 Harlow Cap, that horse from the Bob Baffert stable that is switching into the barn of Steve Asmussen for this race. I was impressed with his last start, and I think he has plenty of talent. And underneath, I do want to use horses like Closer's Krupe, the number 12, and the number 6 Angel of Empire, who figures to be the biggest price of those Brad Cox trainees in this Risen Star on Saturday at Fairgrounds. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.